Despertemos, despertemos humanidad, ya no hay tiempo.
Berta Isabella Caceres Flores was an environmental activist from Honduras and leader of the indigenous Lenca people. She fought to protect natural resources and for the rights of indigenous communities through co-founding the Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras, or COPIN, in 1993. Caceres is primarily recognized for her efforts in halting the construction of the Agua Zarca Dam, a major hydroelectric project on the Lenca people's sacred Gualcarque River. This activism led her to be internationally recognized and eventually received the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2015.
Berta Caceres was born on March 4, 1971 in La Esperanza, Honduras, within the Lenca indigenous community. Growing up in one of the poorest and most isolated areas of the country, her childhood was shaped by the violence and instability in Central America during the 1970s and 80s. Her mother, Berta Flores, was a midwife and activist who took in refugees from El Salvador during the revolution. She was also mayor and governor of her village and state, which were rare positions to have as a woman at the time. She taught Berta and her siblings to always believe in justice. Here we can see how the social construct of nature is applied in Berta's early life. With her mother being a mayor and governor, the socially constructed view of gender roles, that women cannot have these titles, is challenged, and Berta sees the strength and confidence her mother produces to test this boundary. Social norms is another area of nature constructed by Berta's mother, as her behavior of taking in refugees was not socially accepted and was seen as dangerous and risky. The received knowledge that Berta was presented with during her childhood can take great credit for her future environmental activism. Her mother instilled in her the principles of justice and sticking up for what's right, along with the idea of not being afraid of her feminism, but to use it to her advantage and take power from it to accomplish big things. From a young age, Berta connected deeply with her indigenous roots and learned about the Lenca people's guardianship over the environment, and specifically, how their ancestral spirits lived in the waters of the Gualcarque River. The Lenca community follow a way of life that promotes ecocentrism, praising Madre Tierra, and taking only what they need from the natural world. As said in her Goldman Prize speech, "In our worldviews, we are beings who come from the earth, from the water, and from the corn. The Lenca people are ancestral guardians of the rivers. Giving our lives for the protection of the rivers, giving our lives for the well-being of humanity and of this planet." The values that sprouted from her received knowledge in her childhood's socially constructed natures clearly inspired Berta's commitment to protecting the environment and her resistance against the destruction of the Lenca people's beliefs and livelihoods.
Berta Caceres' feminism was not separate from her environmentalism, but deeply connected to her indigenous identity and the struggle for land and natural resources. In the indigenous traditions of the Lenca people, the people are intrinsically tied to the land, acting as the land's guardians. Women in particular play an important role. Lenca no-wave feminism conveys an image of young girls as water protectors. These spirits express the important role that women in their wisdom play within these indigenous societies. According to Berta's daughter, Laura Zuniga, within their communities, women pass down the knowledge of previous generations of their beliefs and customs, helping to strengthen their collective identity in the face of dispossession. Indigenous feminism is grounded in indigenous traditions and combines resistance and agency. Indigenous feminists propose reconfiguring the political system and seek to transform capitalism by defending life. In this perspective of feminism, violence against land is also violence against living bodies. Caceres and other indigenous feminists identify an intersection in the subjugation of rural and indigenous women, with Caceres stating, "We are facing a triple domination, namely capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. This domination works to gain financial and social power while oppressing and violating territory, culture, bodies, and life. One cannot be dismantled without the other, meaning they all have to be dismantled together." According to fellow feminist activist Claudia Carol, Caceres' commitment to the Lenca people allowed her to feel, and not just to understand, the historical struggles of indigenous women against colonialism and patriarchal capitalism, which continued the genocide and destroyed the territories of body and land. Women withstand a history of violence and exploitation against their bodies at the hand of a patriarchal system that undervalues them. The land, too, experiences this. Berta Caceres describes Mother Earth as militarized, fenced in, poisoned, a place where basic rights are systematically violated. Indigenous feminism proposes that protecting their land against exploitation connects with seeking freedom from all forms of oppression. Having co-founded the Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras in 1993, Berta Caceres played a critical and incredibly active role in the council. Berta Caceres advocated from the standpoint of an indigenous woman and the situated knowledge of the violence and instability that swept through Central America in the 1980s and Honduras in 2009. Berta Caceres lived surrounded by injustice. She witnessed political and economic violence and oppression firsthand, motivating her into activism. Caceres saw COPINH's political project as centered on the idea of anti-patriarchal struggle and women's autonomy. They organized in an attempt to imagine new ways of organizing society based on the defense and care of all aspects of life against its commodification and privatization. Berta Caceres also defined an indigenous feminist approach to the council's activism, stating, "We COPINH have not accepted the notion that we first had to fight against transnationals, and later against racism, and lastly against violence against women. We all experience multiple forms of domination, women being the most affected, so the fight must be also multiple and diverse, recognizing these multiple forms of domination." Throughout the campaigns organized by COPINH, women were always present. They showed up to roadblocks and protests, often bringing their children with them. As Laura Zuniga said in a 2020 interview, women are carrying out resistance and leadership.
To understand the fight Berta overcame to save the Gualcarque River, you have to understand the state of the country and military. In 2009, the president Manuel Zelaya was ousted from his position by the military in a coup and accused of a litany of crimes. Instead of improving the country's condition, the situation only got worse after this power shift. During this time, drugs and corruption ran rampant. The military standpoint was to accumulate capital with the help of outside countries. The bottom line was everything, and the ends justify the means. These conditions led to many deaths and a large disconnect between the government and the people. The government illegally sold land to a corporation, DESA, without the consent of the area's inhabitants to build a hydroelectric dam. The anthropocentric act was completely out of line with the people who lived there. The Lincoln people's standpoint is ecocentric, community-driven, and spiritually connected to the river that the dam threatened to taint. If the dam was built, it would threaten to deplete and interfere with the local supply of water, fish and medicine, degrade the surrounding environment, and destroy the livelihoods of the local communities. Berta and her group Copin were already reputable eco-feminist activists who took up the mantle to stop this project. Berta and her cause were a rallying point against the construction of the dam. She gathered many people through Copin and communities who lived along the river. They used connected knowledge to work together to protest and obstruct the construction. DESA and the military clung onto their patriarchy and used violence to repress the people opposing them. When the protesters set up a blockade that didn't break under the strain of evictions, harassment, intimidation, or even violent attacks, the military took it too far, because an outspoken protester, Tomas Garcia, was killed during a peaceful protest. The uproar stalled the dam project for 2 years, but didn't stop it, and the violence of against the protesters remained. Death threats started to pile up, and Berta realized the chances of her getting assassinated were growing. In 2015, Global Witness ranked Honduras as the most dangerous place for an environmental activist to live. The military had become fed up with the activists and started to turn to murder when intimidation and threats were not enough. Berta was quoted as saying, "The army has an assassination list of 18 wanted human rights fighters with my name at the top. I want to live. There are many things I still want to do in this world, but I've never once considered giving up fighting for our territory for a life with dignity, because our fight is legitimate. I take lots of care, but in the end, this country where there is total impunity, I'm vulnerable. When they want to kill me, they will do it." The military feared their agency, so they took it away. On the night of March 3rd, Berta Caceres was assassinated by a group of men in her home, and it took years to break the impunity around the murder, even though a witness, Gustavo Castro Soto, identified one of the gunmen. 5 years after her death, the man responsible for masterminding the assassination was sentenced with the gunmen he hired. The man, Roberto David Castillo, was the former director of DESA, the company building the dam.
Berta Caceres' murder on March 3, 2016 was not the end of her story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter in the fight of indigenous rights and environmental justice. Her death ignited a global outcry, but her family, along with Copin, continues to carry the torch. In the face of threats and intimidation, they persist in demanding accountability for her assassination revealing the deep corruption and collusion between corporations and government forces in Honduras. Their pursuit of justice, however, goes beyond her murder. It's about defending indigenous lands from exploitation, particularly communities like the Lenca, where ancestral rivers are sacred. Caceres was a champion of ecofeminism, connecting the exploitation of natural resources to the oppression of women, especially indigenous ones. She knew that women, as primary caregivers and stewards of the land, are disproportionately affected by the environmental harm. Her work laid the foundation for a movement that treats gender equality and environmental justice as inseparable. Today, young women around the world carry on her legacy. They fight not only for the environment but for gender justice, understanding, as Caceres did, that the two are intertwined. Her words still resonate. Giving our lives for the protection of the rivers is giving our lives for the well-being of humanity and this planet. Berta Caceres' life and legacy are a testament to the power of resistance. She showed the world that protecting indigenous land isn't just about environmental preservation. It's about human dignity and safeguarding a future where all people, especially women, have the right to live in harmony with nature. Her fight continues today through those who share her vision, a world where the environment and gender justice are not ideals, but realities.